The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden reflections across the tranquil waters of my private lake, a place I had cherished for years as my personal retreat from the noise and stress of everyday life. This lake had been in my family for generations, a legacy passed down from my grandfather, who had spent his final years teaching me how to cast a line with patience and respect for nature. I had always followed his teachings, fishing sustainably and ensuring that the ecosystem remained balanced. But none of that would matter to the woman who was about to turn my peaceful afternoon into a living nightmare. As I stood on the dock, adjusting my fishing rod and preparing to reel in a largemouth bass I had been watching ripple through the water's surface, I heard a sudden rustling in the nearby brush, followed by an angry, high-pitched voice that cut through the stillness like a blade. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" A woman shrieked, her voice dripping with hostility before I even had a chance to register her presence. I turned, startled, and saw her storming toward me, her short, cropped hair bouncing wildly as she stomped across the grass with a fury that seemed entirely out of proportion for the situation. Dressed in a loose-fitting green t-shirt with the words "Fish are friends, not food" printed across the front, she carried herself with the kind of self-righteous indignation I had only ever encountered in the most extreme corners of social media. Her eyes, dark and feverish, locked onto my fishing pole with unmasked disgust, and I instinctively knew that nothing I could say would change whatever narrative she had already written in her head. "You're murdering them," she spat, pointing an accusatory finger at my line as I held it mid-air, momentarily frozen in shock. "Do you have any idea how much fish suffer? Do you even care about the pain you're inflicting on them?" The sheer absurdity of the situation made me blink in disbelief. "Ma'am, this is my property," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I'm legally fishing on my own lake. I have every right." "Right?" she interrupted, her nostrils flaring as she took another aggressive step forward. "You have no right to kill innocent creatures just for your own sick pleasure. You're no better than a serial killer." I let out a slow breath, trying to keep my patience in check. "Fishing is a sustainable practice. I respect the environment. I only take what I need, and I follow all conservation laws," I explained, hoping reason would prevail. But she wasn't listening. Her fists clenched at her sides, and I could practically see the steam rising from her ears as she glared at me like I was the embodiment of evil itself. "I am not going to stand here and let you massacre these poor beings," she shrieked. "Put that pole down." I sighed, realizing this was not a conversation that was going to end with a handshake and mutual understanding. "Ma'am, you're trespassing," I stated flatly, shifting my stance to emphasize my ownership of the land. "I'm asking you to leave before this becomes a bigger issue than it needs to be." But rather than backing down, she did the exact opposite. With a sudden, jerky movement, she lunged forward and yanked the fishing rod right out of my hands, tossing it into the lake with a triumphant glare, as if she had just liberated a group of prisoners from a war camp. "There," she huffed, crossing her arms. "Now you can't kill anyone else today." My mouth fell open in stunned silence, my patience hanging by a thread. "Are you out of your damn mind?" I finally asked, my voice rising despite my best efforts to remain composed. "That rod cost me over $400, and you just threw it into the lake like some lunatic." But she didn't care. She stood her ground, her face contorted in self-satisfaction, completely unfazed by the sheer audacity of what she had just done. "Money means nothing compared to a life," she sneered. "If you truly cared about this lake, you wouldn't be exploiting it for your own selfish needs. Lady, this is my lake. My land. My property," I shot back, my blood pressure climbing. "You have no right to come here and start dictating what I do with my own resources." But instead of acknowledging the insanity of her actions, she only escalated. "If the law won't stop you, then I will," she hissed, her fingers twitching at her sides as if barely restraining herself from taking things even further. My gut twisted with a deep, unsettling feeling. This wasn't just some random activist trying to make a point. This woman was unhinged, her fanaticism bubbling just beneath the surface like an active volcano ready to erupt. And yet, despite the warning signals flashing in my head, I made the mistake of assuming she would leave once she realized I wasn't budging. I turned away from her, deciding that retrieving my fishing rod was a better use of my time than engaging with an irrational extremist. But before I could take a single step toward the dock, she grabbed my arm with a shocking force. "You're not going to continue this," she seethed, her nails digging into my skin. "I won't let you." I jerked my arm free, my patience finally snapping. "Get off my property before I call the cops," I warned, my voice low and serious. Her eyes flickered with something dark, something almost dangerous, but she didn't move. Instead, she simply smiled. "Go ahead," she whispered. "Call whoever you want. But you're the one who won't be leaving here today." The moment the words left her lips, a cold shiver crawled up my spine, my instincts screaming that something was very, very wrong. This wasn't just some self-righteous activist trying to make a point. There was an edge of menace in her voice that sent alarm bells ringing in my head. I stood frozen for a moment, my heartbeat drumming in my ears as I measured the weight of her words. "You're the one who won't be leaving here today." What the hell did she mean by that? I took a slow, careful step backward, putting some distance between us, my body tensing as if preparing for a fight I hadn't anticipated. "Look, I don't know what your problem is," I said, my voice steady but edged with warning, "but you need to leave now. Trespassing is already a crime, and if you escalate this, it's only going to get worse for you." But she just smirked, her eyes dark with something I could only describe as delusional certainty, as if she had already made up her mind about how this was going to end. "You don't understand, do you?" she murmured, tilting her head slightly, studying me like I was some sort of puzzle she was trying to solve. "People like you never listen. You think you own the world just because you hold a deed to a piece of land, just because you can throw a line into a lake and take whatever life you want. But that ends today." My pulse pounded, my muscles coiling like a spring as she reached into her bag, her movements slow, deliberate. Too deliberate. I knew that motion. I recognized that movement. I had seen it before, on cops, on hunters, on people who knew exactly what they were reaching for. A gun. The realization hit me like a truck, my brain screaming at my body to move. But before I could react, she pulled it out. A sleek, black pistol, its barrel gleaming ominously in the afternoon light, aimed directly at me. My chest clenched. This had gone from ridiculous to deadly in the span of seconds. My entire body went rigid as I stared down the barrel, my breath catching in my throat, a primal instinct flooding my veins. Survive. "Whoa, whoa. Okay. Let's take a step back here," I said slowly, raising my hands slightly, my eyes locked onto the weapon, tracking her every twitch. "You don't want to do this. You don't want to throw your whole life away over something like this." But she just laughed. It was a short, hollow, chilling sound, the kind that made my stomach churn with dread. "My life?" she echoed, shaking her head, her finger tightening on the trigger. "I'm not the one about to lose everything." And then she fired. The gunshot split the air like a lightning strike. A searing hot pain tore through my side, a sensation so violent and unexpected that for a moment, my brain couldn't even process what had happened. My knees buckled, my vision blurred, and a guttural, involuntary groan ripped from my throat as the impact sent me staggering backward, my hand flying to my torso. Warm, wet, sticky, blood, my blood. The realization hit me all at once, crashing over me like a tidal wave. I'd been shot. "Jesus Christ," I gasped, my breath hitching as the pain exploded through my body like a wildfire. Every nerve ending screamed, my muscles spasming as I fought to stay upright, fought to process what the hell had just happened. She had actually shot me, not just threatened, not just postured. She had pulled the trigger without hesitation. I stumbled, my knees threatening to give out, my world narrowing into a tunnel of pain and shock as she watched me with eerie satisfaction, her chest rising and falling with adrenaline. "Do you feel it now?" she whispered, stepping closer, her voice trembling with some twisted sense of justice. "The helplessness? The fear? That's what every fish you've ever killed has felt. That's what they all feel." I was bleeding out, my hands shaking as I pressed them against the wound, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I needed to think, needed to act, but my mind was fractured, swimming through a haze of pain and disbelief. You're insane, I choked out, my voice barely above a whisper. But she wasn't listening. She was relishing this, reveling in what she thought was righteous vengeance. I had to get out of there. My legs trembled beneath me, the strength seeping from my body like sand slipping through an hourglass. I staggered toward the dock, my one desperate thought escape. Get away. Find help. Call someone. Anyone. But she wasn't done. Not yet. Where do you think you're going? She called, her voice sickly sweet, her footsteps crunching against the grass as she followed me. Oh no, no, no. You don't just get to walk away after all the lives you've stolen. Another shot rang out. Wood splintered beside me as the bullet buried itself into the dock, missing me by inches. My heart lurched, a fresh surge of panic surging through me like a defibrillator jolt. She wasn't just trying to wound me. She was trying to finish me off. Stop! I wheezed, my vision swimming, my body barely holding itself together. Please, just stop. But she only laughed again, the sound chilling in its certainty. Now you want mercy, she sneered. Did you ever show mercy to the fish you ripped from the water? Did you ever think about the suffering you caused? Another step, another shot. The bullet whizzed past my ear, so close I felt the heat of it. I was running out of time. My breaths were shallow, uneven, my limbs sluggish as I reached the edge of the dock, the lake stretching before me like a silent witness to this madness. I had one choice left. I jumped. The cold water rushed around me, swallowing me whole, the pain in my side intensifying as I fought to keep my head above the surface. My lungs burned, my strength fading with every passing second, but I forced myself forward, my only goal to put as much distance as possible between me and the lunatic with the gun. Above me, her voice shrieked in rage. Coward, she screamed. Face me. You deserve this. But I didn't stop. Couldn't. I swam, the water turning red around me, my limbs growing heavier with every stroke, my mind teetering on the edge of unconsciousness. I didn't know how long I had. I didn't know if I'd make it. But I knew one thing, if I stopped, I was dead. The world around me had become a blur of red and black, my body suspended between survival and oblivion as I struggled against the growing weight of exhaustion pulling me under. Every stroke through the cold, murky water sent fresh waves of agony rippling through my body, the wound in my side a searing brand of pain that throbbed with every heartbeat. I was losing blood. I was losing strength. And somewhere above, on the shore of my own goddamn lake, the woman who had just shot me was still screaming, her voice sharp and fractured with righteous fury. You can't run forever, she shrieked, her silhouette barely visible through the haze of water and blood clouding my vision. You deserve this. This is for every innocent life you've taken. I barely heard her anymore. My only focus was survival. Each kick, each desperate pull of my arms through the water felt weaker than the last, my muscles trembling under the strain. But I forced myself forward, my mind clinging to the single thought that had kept me moving since the moment she pulled the trigger. I can't die here. Not like this. The lake had always been my sanctuary, my refuge, a place where I had found peace, but now it was tainted with blood and madness, a place where I had almost been killed over something as simple as fishing. How the hell had it come to this? Somewhere in the distance, a voice, a new voice, pierced through the fog of my pain. A man's voice. What the hell is going on here? Help. A fresh surge of adrenaline shot through me. I twisted in the water, my breath ragged as I struggled to lift my head above the surface, blinking through the stinging mix of blood and lake water clouding my vision. A figure. 2, 3. They stood at the edge of the property, just beyond the trees, neighbors, people, witnesses, and then sirens. Loud, piercing, getting closer. Karen whirled around, panic flashing across her face as she spotted them. Her gun still clenched tightly in her hands, her knuckles white. For the first time, she looked uncertain. For the first time, she seemed to realize that she had gone too far. But still, she refused to back down. Stay out of this, she shrieked at them, her wild eyes darting between the newcomers and the lake, where I struggled to stay afloat. He's a murderer. He kills for fun. I was protecting innocent lives. One of the men, a tall, burly guy in his 40s, someone I vaguely recognized from the properties across the way, stepped forward, eyes wide with disbelief. "You shot him." Karen's breath hitched, her grip tightening on the pistol as if she was ready to defend herself, to justify her actions no matter how insane they were. "It wasn't murder," she snapped. "It was justice. He's a monster. A butcher. The sirens were deafening now. Red and blue lights flashed through the trees, reflecting off the lake's rippling surface, casting distorted shadows across the blood-streaked water where I fought to keep my head above the surface. I was fading. The pain was too much. The cold was too much. I was going to drown even after all of this. I could feel it. But then strong hands grabbed me. I barely registered what was happening, barely heard the frantic shouts or saw the figures pulling me onto a boat, onto a dock, onto safety. All I could do was gasp as my body collapsed against the wooden planks, my vision tunneling, my fingers slipping through the sticky, crimson mess at my side. "We've got him," a voice called, somewhere above me. "He's alive. Jesus Christ, someone get an ambulance." Now, then everything went dark. I woke up to the beeping of hospital monitors. The light was too bright, the air too sterile, the sheets too stiff beneath me. My body felt like lead, every limb weighted down with exhaustion. But the moment I tried to shift, pain lanced through my side, white-hot and unrelenting. I groaned. "You're awake." The voice was deep, firm. "A cop." I forced my eyes open, blinking through the haze of medication and fatigue, and found myself staring at a uniformed officer sitting beside my bed. "Where?" My throat was dry, my voice barely more than a rasp. "Hospital," the officer answered, leaning forward, his gaze sharp but not unkind. "You're lucky. The bullet missed your organs, but you lost a hell of a lot of blood. They had to pull you out of the lake before you drowned." I let my head fall back against the pillow, relief washing over me in slow, heavy waves. I was alive. I was alive. "And Karen?" I asked hoarsely. The officer's expression hardened. "In custody." She was still holding the gun when we arrived, ranting about how she was saving lives. She refused to drop it at first. Almost got herself shot, too. I exhaled, shaking my head in disbelief. "She's being charged with attempted murder," the officer continued. "Among other things. Her lawyer's trying to argue insanity. But the fact that she doubled down on her actions, even after being arrested, isn't helping her case." I wasn't surprised. The woman was a fanatic, a zealot so blinded by her own ideology that she genuinely believed murdering a human being was justified because I had the audacity to fish in my own lake. I thought about the way she had looked at me, even as I bled out. The satisfaction, the certainty, the belief that she was right. "People like her," I murmured, shaking my head. "They don't see the line between activism and insanity." The officer studied me for a moment, then nodded. "No, they don't. The media ate the story alive. Vegan activist shoots man over fishing right. Extremism gone too far? Vegan woman tried to kill a fisherman. Lake shooting. How ideology turned deadly. For weeks it was everywhere, news channels, social media, debates on talk shows. Some people condemned Karen's actions, calling her a lunatic who had taken her beliefs to the extreme. Others, the truly unhinged ones, defended her, saying that she had only done what was necessary to protect innocent lives. But at the end of the day, it didn't matter. She was going to prison, and I was never going to look at my lake the same way again.